Horror Fanatic here, and it's the second Wednesday of the month, which means it's time to talk about a book. And this month's book is Better Homes and Hauntings by Molly Harper. As I've been reading some Dean Koontz before this book, I felt it'd take a nice step to have something more lighthearted. So, why not some paranormal romance? And when it comes to that, I kind of always go towards Molly Harper. I've read her entire Naked Werewolf series, and I was hoping for something similar, and she didn't disappoint. Though, the ending does feel rushed, and I do have a few issues with the overall plot of the story. And not so much the plot. More vague characterness. It's hard to describe. But overall, for what it is, I really enjoyed it. I'm happy to say that for a paranormal romance, the focus, while of course heavily on romance, has plenty of horror in it too. Until the end, as with the divide between comedy and, tragedy, comedies end with weddings, and romances tend to fall into the comedy category. Better Homes and Hauntings is about Nina Linden, who has been hired to renovate the gardens of the Crane's Nest off the road of Rhode Island, a dilapidated family manor belonging to Deacon Whitney, the not sole surviving heir, because there was a ton of them, but the main heir of Gerald Whitney, a rich uppity-up of way back when. His great-great-great-grandfather, I believe is what they phrase he is. Anyway, the family has, since Gerald Whitney's wife, Catherine, was murdered, and rumor has it at Gerald's hands, though nothing was ever proven, has fallen into disgrace and bad business dealings, leaving the family a husk shell of its former glory. However, Deacon has changed all that, making millions on the internets, with ID basically Facebook for this book series. As part of what to do with all of his newfound wealth, he has decided to renovate his old family home, the Crane's Nest, and has hired on a crew of experts to help him with it. Nina has been hired to bring the gardens and the, plants of the island back to par, because it has been, heavily ignored for generations. Also brought on is Cindy as the lead cleaner/organizer to catalog any of the antiques left in the home so they may be sold off or given to family. His best friend, Deacon's best friend, Jack, who is head of construction. And they are eventually joined by Dottie, his cousin, who is looking for Catherine's diaries to shed light on her final days and to disprove that she was murdered by Gerald. And to prove of the family curse. The family's cursed. That's why they have no money and are fallen into disrepute. The house is haunted, which works really well, actually. They give the house a dark history. They give it gives it kind of a, that's what we described as, it feels kind of like rose red to me, but less scary. The group experiences varying levels of supernatural heebie-jeebies, from visions to witnessing apparitions to being straight up attacked by ghost-like entities. And it all works really well for a horror novel. It works well within the setting, the haunted mansion, isolated on its own island by itself, miles from the mainland, cut off from outside help. And it works really, really well. The tone in those parts of the book's solid, but it never seems to stick to the horror element that far. Because for the romance to work, it needs to be significantly more lighthearted. So, the lighthearted atmosphere tends to win over the dark, foreboding atmosphere, which is sad, as I'd like to see a stronger balance of the two. As for the romance aspects, it's okay. Outside of the paranormal romance of Molly Harper and a handful of other authors, I really don't delve into romance novels that often. They're just not my cup of tea. But when they're mixed with horror, I can typically acquiesce, and I do so happily. Something that would have helped this area is if the romantic rivals for both Nina and Deacon, Nina's being her ex-business partner Rick, and with Deacon's being V, from a woman from another socialite family who wants to marry for status and wealth and status. And she's a real bad interior decorator, like awful. Like, when the book fired her, I felt her bad for marring a fictional house bad. Yeah. But neither of these characters are instantly painted in a villainous light with no redeeming value. Like, nothing about them makes them likable people, and that doesn't make for good villains. Villains should not... They shouldn't see themselves as villainous, and these characters kind of do. Except for Rick, Nina's ex-business partner, who's deranged to the point of stalker crazy. Like, I've never been luckily harassed by someone stalker crazy, and I'm glad about that. And for having a crack security team put in, like, security cameras, he has a lot of blind spots this guy's able to slip through, even with the help of a ghost. You think that, especially after the first time, blind spots would have been covered, but there seems to be more than enough for this guy to sneak around the island, which really hurt the book for me. But they're not the only romance going on. As the Nina and Deacon fall for each other, which of course is going to happen. He's the rich billionaire and she's the Earth goddess. There's also Cindy, who plays kind of a Cinderella story, like, except for it's rags to riches. She starts off like, I think, a cook's daughter, or like a restaurateur's daughter, working in a restaurant. And this is where she originally meets Jake, the architect and Deacon's best friend. And they date briefly before they stop dating and go their separate ways, which she seems to take a lot of issue with, that they just stopped seeing each other as they both got busy with their lives and moved on from one another, and that he forgot the girl that he dated twice 8-9 years ago. And I can understand being peeved about it, but she takes it to a new level of jealous, like shallowness that she never really redeemed herself from afterwards in the book, in my eyes. As she did feel very petty and vindictive about it, especially after he learned and did apologize and remembered her after it was brought up. Because, like, the amount of time that passed isn't like a couple of months. It's like years. Like a very long measure of time. I kind of wish Dottie, though, had a romantic interest of some kind, as she kind of felt like the odd girl out. Always the bridesmaid, never the bride in this book. And just kind of sits in the back and supports the other's romantic interests, and I can understand the role she has to play. And I'd be fine with her not having a romantic partner if she had another character to play off of that was also single and not interested, like another male or female character, and they were in a, like, platonic relationship, and the two of them schemed together to make the other couples work. That would have been more fun than her kind of wafting about. But I really did like her. She was probably my favorite character, and I do like her tune changes when she experiences the ghostly apparitions, as she's very jealous of Rihanna. It never happens to her. Something I did like really heavily about Rick, the stalker character of the book and Nina's ex-business partner, is the thriller aspects he brought to the book. His physical world crazy, coupled with his semi-influential possession by a ghost, is kind of not the clearest on the degree of possession that he experiences, as it adds some strong thriller aspects and some instant real-life danger to the island, which, while I kind of call bullshit on, the book was better for its inclusion. Also, the book introduces a number of side characters, just briefly, that I would have liked to show up more, and to be perhaps the characters I'd mentioned that would Dottie to work and connive with to make Nina and Deacon or Jake and Cindy work. And that's the... I forget his name. He's mentioned briefly, but he's an older man who comes every day from the mainland with a bad heart, but he is like the best carpenter in the area. And a little bit he's in, he seems like a jolly sort, and he would have been more fun to have more around in the book. And I would have liked to see Deacon's personal assistant, V, show up more, for she's only in one scene, which, other than to introduce Jack in a social atmosphere, he still comes off as douchey McDouche-Waffleson in that scene, actually. Like, again, there's no redeeming attributes to that guy's character, and he's very much a one-dimensional villain, which is really sad, because no one is truly one-dimensional. But she comes off as fun, and in working for Deacon's genuine best interest. And I would have liked her character to show up more, rather than to be brought in and then instantly discarded, never to be spoken of again. But back to, I want to talk a little more about the Crane's Nest, the dread location for this island, because the dilapidated manor estate is a great backdrop for any ghost story. And it works really well here because of the love story that's involved with the house's creation, with Gerald building it for his wife Catherine, and the lead architect being a childhood romance of Catherine's who becomes obsessed with her, and then her untimely demise shortly after its completion, and then the architect Jack disappearing. That added a lot of depth and history to the place that really needed to be there, and it works very well. When they describe the statuary, the faded wallpaper, the broken banisters, it all fits really well. And I would have liked the house being restored and coming back to life to being part of what spurs the entities in this book onward, when it really has no involvement whatsoever. Tangent is just occurring to me. Deacon is often brought up to wondering why he alone has escaped the Whitney curse, why he alone has made a fortune, and that's never explained. They explain where the curse comes from, and how the curse comes into effect. I'm going to do my best not to spoil it. But it never explains how he has evaded it. And that seems like an unanswered thread that's really annoying. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Like, overall, beyond that, it's pretty generic for the genre with it's in. Molly Harper does great work, as she always does. And sure, I'm kind of trash-talking her novel. That said, I'm glad I read it. Like, I'm glad I read her Ran with the Naked Werewolf series. And one last thing, like, if I'm going to read a romance novel, I typically reach for Molly Harper first. So, overall, if this genre is your thing, or you've read Molly Harper's other books, or at least one of them, and liked it, I would heavily recommend you pick up this book. If you want to pick up a book that's primarily a romance with some haunted house themes thrown in, and a dash of thriller, that has a little bit of horror but is relatively light, and ends happily ever after, this is the book for you. That said, back into the rabbit hole I go, with Dean Koontz' third book in the Automat series, Brother Odd. And, I'll talk about that next month. See you then.